So welcome. We are very fortunate to have Swami Nirvanananda Saraswati to give us some opening music. He gave us a lovely kirtan last night, if you were lucky enough to join us for that. He does a lot of charitable work in Puri, India, and his music goes to support a lot of that work. So, Swamiji.
Namaste. Thank you. Tatsabitur varenyam bargo devasya dhimai diyo yona prachodaya. Om Bhurbuva Swaha Tatsabitur varenyam bargo devasya dhimai diyo yona prachodaya. Om Bhurbuva Swaha Tatsabitur varenyam bargo devasya dhimai diyo yona prachodaya. Prachodaya. Om Bhurbuva Swaha Tatsabitur varenyam bargo devasya dhimai diyo yona prachodaya. Om Bhurbuva Swaha Tatsabitur varenyam bargo devasya dhimai diyo yona prachodaya. Om Bhurbuva Swaha Tatsabitur varenyam bargo devasya dhimai diyo yona prachodaya. 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 Prachodaya.
Thank you, Swamiji. The topic today is worship of the Spirit by the Spirit. And I'll begin with a chant that Swami Vivekananda particularly liked. Shrinman tu Vishwe Amritasya Putra Ayedamani Divyani Tastu Vedahametam Puri Purusham Mahantam Adityavarnam Tamasa Parastat Tvameva viditva atimrityureti nanya panta vidyate yanaya utishtata jagrata prapyavarani bodhata utishtata jagrata prapya varani bodhata. Hear ye, children of immortal bliss, even ye that reside in higher spheres. I have found the Ancient One, who is beyond all darkness, all delusion. Knowing him alone, you will be saved from death. There is no other way. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. So in his lecture on Is Vedanta the Future Religion, Swami Vivekananda tells us that God is a spirit, and he should be worshipped in spirit and in truth. What is a spirit? We are all spirit. And why is it that we don't realize this? What makes you different than me? Body and nothing else, he tells us. Forget the body and all is spirit. Later in the same lecture, using a very prophetic tone, he says, "The hour comes when great men shall rise and shall make vivid and powerful the true religion, worship of the Spirit by the Spirit. If I go beyond the senses, the body, you will appear as Spirit and God. I also will see that I am Spirit, and that the Spirit never dies. There is no death anywhere." Man has freedom already, Swamiji tells us, but he'll have to discover it. He has it, but every moment he forgets it. That discovering, whether consciously or unconsciously, is the whole life of every one of us. Swamiji tells us immortality comes when we know ourselves as one with all, living in all bodies, perceiving through all minds. Vedanta doesn't say give up the external reality. It says transcend. Recognize yourself as spirit and worship as spirit. In the Bible, we actually find the same statement. God is a spirit and must be worshipped in spirit and in truth. Here we're told that God not only is spirit, but that true worship is worshiping him in spirit and in truth. It's not the external place where you worship or the forms you use that are significant. It's your internal awareness. God is not someone sitting up in the clouds looking down on us. He's a true spirit, and the true worshiper worships God in spirit and in truth. This means we worship him from the heart. That is the true worship. That is wholehearted worship. What is truth? What is reality? The reality in Indian philosophy is much different than the reality we think of in Western thought. In the West, where there's an emphasis on the scientific knowledge, we consider reality to be that which is perceived by the senses, which we can experience and which we can measure with our senses. But in Indian philosophy, reality is that which never changes, the eternal background of all that is. It is what they call the truth of truth, satyasya satya, unchangeable and unlimited. Yes, there is a relative truth within the realm of the senses, something which is true under certain circumstances only, the Vyavaharika Satya. But the highest truth, correctly speaking, has to have an eternity about it, an everlastingness. It's unconditional, and it's independent, and it's limitless. In spirit and in truth really mean the same things. Everything is spirit only, and this is the truth, the living reality. Know the truth about yourself, about God. This is worshiping God in spirit. Yes, Brahman is Satchit Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss absolute. In him we live, move, and have our being. But we also must know, as the great Mahavakyas tell us, I am Brahman, aham brahmasmi. This also is the truth, and the truth is eternal. It is unconditional, limitless, beyond birth and death. Satyameva jayate. Truth alone triumphs. Christ also said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free." Knowing the truth is freedom, because it is unconditional and eternal. We too have to go beyond body and mind, beyond this material reality, to be reborn, as it were, in the spirit. This is the immortality that we are all seeking. People are becoming more and more aware that there is a spiritual reality behind everything. The question comes, who am I really? Who is it that worships anyway? This is a question that Ramana Maharshi asked himself until he realized God. He analyzed everything and kept going inward until he realized the truth within himself, simply by asking himself, who am I? And once he saw that inner truth about himself, once he really experienced it, it never left his awareness. Swami Ashokananda, a follower of Swami Vivekananda, tells us a great change has to be brought about within oneself in order to worship God in spirit and in truth. Ordinarily, we're so engrossed in concrete objects that the mind has become scattered. There's a continual movement and restlessness in our minds. When the mind is restless, we think of ourselves as psychophysical beings, mostly physical. The outside reality appears as a physical reality, and we forget that behind it all is awareness, the spirit. The material world becomes our reality. Yes, that's how we often see it. We cannot really think of the spirit. The mind has to become quieter before we can think of ourselves as spirit, as something different, separate from the body and the mind. And this is done through meditation. If there has to be a change in our consciousness, we have to realize we're not merely the body and the mind, and that others, too, are something more. One teacher told a student to imagine that she was seeing the Atman in every person she met, and to go on thinking this way about the spirit in all beings. He said, "This is the truth, and in the end you will realize it." The means and the end have to become one. This is spiritual practice. Truth is a powerful thing, and the truth is that all are your own, not one or two select people. All are your own. Everyone in the whole universe becomes your own relative. As Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi said, "No one is a stranger, my child. The whole world is your very own." This is extremely hard to put into practice because we focus on the external differences between us instead of the internal unity behind all people. If we dive deep into ourselves, we begin to see that behind this material world, there is a finer reality, a spiritual reality. When your mind becomes even finer, you will see that you are absolutely separate from the body and the mind. You will feel this universe is not a material universe at all. It's pervaded by spirit and consciousness. God will seem very close to you, a reality, a living consciousness that percolates through your very being, through everything that you see. When we worship in a temple, we're not just worshiping a picture or a stone image. We're worshiping the spiritual reality which is represented there. It has a timeless quality about it. You begin to live in the present moment. Vedanta teaches us that we do not have to go outside of ourselves to know the truth. All the past and all the future are here in the present. When you think you're knowing the past, you're only imagining it in the present moment. To see the future, you'd have to bring it down to the present, which is the only reality. The rest is imagination. This present is all that is. Our worries about the future, our regrets about our past, are really only in our minds. They cause us a lot of anxiety. They're not reality at all. They are pain-bearing impressions in the mind. Sri Sarada Devi once said she didn't know what worry was. This is because she was constantly repeating the name of God, and she had no time to worry. All is here right now. This present is all that is. There's only one. If I change, you change. If I go beyond the power of the senses, you too will be spirit or God. That is the reality. Things are not what they seem on the surface. When our minds become completely calm, Swami Ashokananda tells us, we will become completely separated from the body and the mind. We will even forget their existence, he says. You will forget the existence of this world. All that you will perceive will be the one undivided spirit, having neither interior or exterior. What you perceive then cannot be spoken about or even conceived in terms of our present experience. Only greatness appreciates greatness. Only God realizes God. The dreamer is only the dream, and it hasn't any other basis. The dream's not one thing and the dreamer another. The keynote running through the music of all existence is, I am He, I am He, Shivoham, Shivoham. All the other notes are but variations, and they don't really affect the theme. We are the living books. The books are but the words that we have spoken. Everything is the living God, the living Christ, the living Spirit. See it as such. Read man, Swamiji says. He is the living poem. We are the light that illumines all. We are spirit in a spiritual world. And everything that we do can be worship. This is the highest realization. In his lecture, The Ideal of a Universal Religion, Swami Vivekananda says that the message of the Hindu is spirituality. Let them talk about India's regeneration, but upon it depends the welfare of the whole world. If the Hindu is not spiritual, I don't call him a Hindu. Here in India, the first and foremost duty of our lives is to be spiritual first for our national welfare. He says we have to seek out in the present day the spiritual forces of the race. Natural union in India has been gathering up its past spiritual forces. This is true for us as well. Raise once more that mighty banner of Advaita, for on no other ground can you have the wonderful love until you see the same Lord is present everywhere. In one word, the ideal of Vedanta is to know man as he really is, and this is its message. That if you cannot worship your brother, man, as a manifestation of God, how can you worship God which is unmanifested? He asks us, carry the light and life of Vedanta to every door and rouse up the divinity that is hidden within every soul. Very few realize that this message harmonizes the ideas of the Vedas and brings them into the practical reality of a new age. And this will bring about the unification of mankind as a whole. You may attain this through ritual worship. Yes, even the worship of a deity in a shrine. Your heart may go to God, and you may perceive only Him. A great attraction for God will come, and you find that you're drawn to Him. Only love comes from your heart, and you'll find that you're drawn to Him. You sing His glories in everything that you do. A great yearning may come to you, and find yourself increasing your spiritual practices naturally. You may find yourself doing austerities you would have thought were impossible for you at another time. You may long for God and weep for Him through His grace. He may appear before you. You may have His darshan, vision, and when that happens, the mind will become quiet, and you will realize your oneness with Him in spirit. You know then that it is true. Or you may reason, I'm not the body and the mind. And realizing this, you can also realize that you're spirit. Then too the mind will become quiet, and the world will appear spiritual. As Sri Krishna says, the greatest of all the Lord's devotees is the jnani, he who has found the truth about himself and about God. The essential thing is that we transcend our small selves and see that we're spirit. We have to give up all these notions that are binding us down. In Song of the Sannyasin, Swami Vivekananda tells us, for fetters, though of gold, are not less strong to bind. Then off with them, sannyasin bold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. We must affirm that we are the spirit and that everyone else is spirit also. Nothing less will do. Wherever we look, we want to see spirit only. We must see that behind the body and the mind, the spirit is always there. We want to know that we are separate from this body and the mind. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Master tells us the Jiva Mukti rightly understands that the Atman and the body are two separate things. After realizing God, one does not identify the Atman with the body. These two are separate, like the kernel and the shell of a coconut when the milk dries up. The Atman moves, as it were, within the body. When the milk of worldly mindedness has dried up, one gets self-knowledge. Then one feels that the Atman and the body are two separate things. The kernel of a green almond or a betel nut can't be separated from the shell. But when they're ripe and the juice dries up, the kernel separates naturally from the shell. It can be heard rattling around inside if you shake it. After the attainment of knowledge of God, the Atman is viewed as separate from the body. When we get a glimpse of this, we'll understand the truth of action in action. We will know that we're not the doer. We'll feel that we are the Spirit, and it's Spirit only shining everywhere. We'll see that others also are the Spirit. And if I understand that I am Spirit and you are Spirit, then true service will follow. One external practice of worship of the Spirit by the Spirit is serving God in man, worshiping the living God, as Swamiji tells us to do. Wherever you see the Spirit, render your service there. In whatever form he appears, respond to him accordingly. If he comes to you as a sick man, give him medicine. If he comes as a hungry man, give him food. If he comes as an ignorant man, give him intellectual knowledge. That's your worship. If you see him as Spirit before you, whatever you give, that is your service, your worship. It's the God behind man that you're worshiping and giving service to. Your service is based on the love of God. If you want any good to come, just throw your ceremonials overboard and worship the living God, the man, the God, every being that wears a human form, Swamiji tells us. God in his universal as well as his individual aspect. The universal aspect of God means this world, and worshiping it means serving it. This indeed is true work. This indeed is true worship. Serve the living God. God comes to you in the blind, in the halt, in the poor, in the weak, in the diabolical. What a glorious chance for you to worship. The moment you think you're helping, you undo the whole thing. You degrade yourself, he says. He says, the Vedanta says there's nothing that is not God. It may frighten many of you, but you will understand it by degrees. Swamiji tells us, the living God is within you, and yet you're building churches and temples. Again, in the Song of the Sannyasin, Swamiji says, where seekest thou that freedom, friend? This world nor that can give. In books and temples vain thy search. Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags you on. Then cease lament. Let go thy hold, Sannyasin bold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. The only God to worship is the human soul in the human body. Of course, all animals are temples too, but man is the highest, the Taj Mahal of temples. If I can't worship in that, no other temple will be of any advantage. The moment I've realized God sitting in the temple of every human body, the moment I stand in reverence before every human being and see God in him, that moment I am free from bondage. Everything that binds vanishes, and I am free. Every action can be worship. the beautiful chant that from the Bhagavad Gita that we recite before eating, and we all know it, Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmajno, Brahmahutam, Brahmaivatena Gantavyam, Brahmakarma Samadhina. Brahman is the ritual. Brahman is the offering. Brahman is he who offers to the fire that is Brahman. If a man sees Brahman in every action, he will find Brahman. We have to see that spirit everywhere, in the cooking, in the meal, in the eating, in the cook, in the one who is eating, in everything that we do. This is a state of a man who has a ripe ego, one who knows the truth. And this is worship of spirit by the Spirit. Brother Lawrence, a Christian saint, once said, "In the time of business does not with me differ from the time of prayer. The noise and clatter of my kitchen, while several people are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God in that, in as great tranquility as if I were on my knees in the Blessed Sacrament." He said he had no recollection of things he'd done once they were past. He hardly realized them while he was doing them. That on leaving the table, he knew not what he'd been eating, but that with one single end in view, he did it all for the love of God, rendering him thanks for directing these acts throughout his life. He did everything simply, in a manner which kept him steadfastly in the loving presence of God. He said there was neither need of art or science for going to God, but only a heart resolutely determined to apply itself to him and nothing else, and to love him only. We have only to recognize God intimately as present in us and to address ourselves to him every moment. That our spiritual progress doesn't depend on changing our work, but in doing that work for God's sake, which we commonly do for ourselves. He said we can do little things for God. Quote, "I turn the cake that is frying in the pan for love of him. It is enough for me to pick up a straw from the ground for the love of God." This is living in the now. This is living in the Spirit. Again, in him we live, move, and have our being. We too would see God in every action if we were living in truth, in the presence of God, worshiping the Spirit by the Spirit, and always aware that we are the Spirit. It may seem a long way off, like learning a foreign language. At first you have to translate and remember everything. We have to practice a long time. But later we will think and dream in that language, in that spiritual reality, as it were. Some of us were talking about Swami Paramananda, a disciple of Vivekananda, the other evening. And it was said about him not so much that he meditated for many hours, but that he was meditative. He was very active, but he was surrounded by a meditative atmosphere. It was part of him. It was no longer a verb. It had become an adjective. Not that these spiritual men and women are more spiritual than we are, but they're living in the Spirit. They've uncovered the spiritual reality which is in all of us. I've heard it said to think about God before you start work. And again, when you finish, offer it to God. This is very good at first. But it seems to me more and more that we have to be aware of the Spirit even while we work. Not that we become sloppy in our work, but as we understand work is simply the gunas working on the gunas, we step back from possessing the work. We actually will become more efficient in action. We know that when we drive a car, we're concentrating and alert, but it also is habit. Sometimes long periods can pass without thinking about it, yet we're doing very well. I'm certainly not advocating falling asleep at the wheel. But there is a different part of the mind that seems to kick in. We should not be unmindful, but we can dwell in a higher part of the mind, a spiritual awareness, more and more, even while our minds and bodies work. I am the machine, thou art the operator. More and more we can step back from our identification with the working process, with the body and with the mind. Not that it stops or we become sloppy in our work. We're just more able to let God work through us and are more aware of the Spirit. If I approach God from the standpoint of love and devotion, I'll feel myself also to be infinite love, infinite joy. I shall lose myself in this infinite love and infinite joy. And that is worship of the Spirit by the Spirit. In the end, the worshiper and the worshipped become one. Just as Sri Ramakrishna saw Brahman in all the worship vessels and the image on the altar itself, we also can worship trying to remember this one truth. In fact, in the worship itself, one purifies oneself and then worships the deity inside before drawing out the presence from the heart and worshiping it on the altar in front of the worshiper. The Spirit is actually breathed into a flower and placed before us, before the deity, and then worshipped. At the end of the worship, the Spirit is taken back into the heart. God can also appear on the altar as Spirit. We can worship him there as Spirit. It's not the picture we're worshiping, but the living presence in the photograph or image. When one sees, as Sri Ramakrishna did, that all the blooming plants are so many bouquets on the altar of this earth, that everything we see before us is God. It is an eternal worship. Worship of the Spirit by the Spirit. And then it becomes difficult to even pick the flowers for worship. This is what happened to him. But this is a very advanced state. Worship can, in fact, be the means to attain this higher awareness. If we are Spirit, and everyone else is Spirit too, then worship of the Spirit by the Spirit is in fact exemplified in Swamiji's ideal of worshiping the living God, or service of God in man. This Spirit is the truth about ourselves and about others. Here again, the idea is present in Christianity. For on the day before Good Friday, Christ gave his 2 commandments. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. That is, we have to worship the Spirit by the Spirit as God loves us, and also in our neighbor, in all people, for they are in fact Spirit, just as we are. In our Ramakrishna order, we have the twin ideals, Atmanamokshartam, Jagat Hitaya Cha, for one's own liberation and for the highest good of the whole world. We have to realize the Spirit and then worship the Spirit by the Spirit. It is said that when a devotee reaches a high state, he doesn't care much about the good of the whole world. He doesn't care much for the devotees. His mind is on God alone. When he reaches a still higher state, which has been called the middle state, he loves God, but he also loves the devotees of God. And in the third stage, the highest stage, he has devotion for God, for the devotees, and for all living beings equally. This is the Vijnana state that Ramakrishna speaks about when he says that everything is the divine play of the mother. Everything is spirit only. And it is seen as such in every moment. He says, all you need to know is who I am and who you are. How can we practice this truth? We have to discriminate between the real and the unreal. Sadasat vastu viveka, between truth and untruth. Intelligence is a very fine part of the mind, and by exercising our buddhi and our discrimination, we can advance toward that realization of spirit. A person who lives in the liberated intelligence feels himself to be incorporeal, limitless. He does not feel aware that he is the body. There's almost a timeless quality about him, even though he is still in the mind. If we want to say we are beyond body and mind, how much we have to rise above. We have to rise above even the liberating intelligence, where we feel that we're making choices. To be established in true spirit, we are spirit, not even the mind. As Swami Vivekananda says, unselfishness is the very basis on which ethics stands. We can try to be unselfish and say always not I, but thou, not self, but non-self. There is the idea of Confucius, don't do anything to someone else which you wouldn't like to be done to you. The ideas of individualism to which we cling when we're trying to find that infinite power or that infinite pleasure through the senses have to be given up. We have to put ourselves last and others before us in order to break through our own selfishness, our identification with our small desires. Ethics says that I must hold myself last. The infinite will never find expression upon the material plane. So man has to give up the plane of matter and rise to other spheres to seek a deeper expression of that infinite. All ethical laws have that one central idea: self-abnegation, self-sacrifice. Swamiji tells us this is the mother's love. The mother will sacrifice herself for her child. In the Bible we read, a greater love has no man than that he will lay down his life for his friend. Perfect self-annihilation is the ideal of ethics. Swamiji says, people are startled if they're asked not to think of their individualities, especially in this country. They seem so very much afraid of losing what they call their individuality. We don't understand the freedom that will be ours when we realize that we are one with all beings. Ethics itself is not the end, but it is a means to the end. It helps us to break through the crystallization of attachment to material things that we have built up around ourselves. Man is man, so long that he is struggling to rise above nature. And this nature is both internal and external. It's good to conquer external nature. Science and technology have done much to help us physically, but it's still higher to live in harmony with external nature and learn to conquer our own internal nature. This conquering of the inner man, understanding the secrets of the subtle workings that are within the human mind and psyche, belongs entirely to religion. The strength of every race lies in its spirituality. This spirituality does not belong to India alone. Swamiji tells us, children of immortal bliss. Yes, we have received much from India, but that eternal bliss lies in the heart of every one of us, no matter where we were born. Born heir to the infinite art thou. Within thy own heart is the ocean of love. The bliss has only to be awakened in us. Swami Vivekananda came to this country to teach, and he loved American people. He wanted us to realize the Spirit, and he spoke about worship of the Spirit by the Spirit here in the West. I believe that he wanted us to carry this idea into practice in our own lives. Swamiji said, may I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls, and above all, my God the wicked, my God the miserable, my God the poor of all races, of all species, is the special object of my worship. In a poem to a friend, he says, from highest Brahman to yonder worm, and to the very minutest atom, everywhere is the same God, the all-love. Friend, offer mind, soul, and body at their feet. These are his manifold forms before thee. Rejecting them, friend, where seekest thou for God? Who loves all beings without distinction, he is indeed worshiping best his God. It's not enough to simply think these thoughts and try to see everyone is divine. We have to change ourselves. When we think, I like this person rather than that person, what are we doing? When we get hurt because someone does something to us or doesn't do something, who's getting hurt? The spirit, the self, is never wounded. Who is it that has done something to us? The person who has done something hurtful to us is really no other than God. We're finding fault with God himself. If we analyze this, situation will become so painful for us that we'll be forced to change ourselves. Actually, everything that comes from God, and he can't be wrong. It cannot therefore hurt us. This selecting, I like this, I don't like that, it's coming from our ego. The ego, like a stick, lies across the ocean of Satchidananda. And when this ego is taken away, there remains only one ocean of consciousness. But as long as the stick of the ego remains, there is the appearance of two. Here's one part of the water, there's the other part. After realization, the ego, if it remains at all, is the ripe ego only. The ego of knowledge, or the ego of a child. From a distance, the burnt string lying on the ground may look like a real one, but if you come near and blow on it, it disappears. Slowly, slowly, remove the contradictions from yourself, and you will find yourself expanding, learning to be infinitely patient, This is not an easy task. We must be completely sincere and honest with ourselves, and then change. Our lives have to be lifted up to the level of our intellectual convictions. Our beliefs and our living impulses must become one. Shravana, manana, nididhyasana. Hear the truth. Meditate on it and realize it within yourself. First, the strong conviction, then the sincere effort to change our action, to put our convictions into practice. This is practical Vedanta, and its essence is worship of the Spirit by the Spirit. Everything that you do is a form of worship. Everything that you see is God Himself, covered by name and form. Life becomes a continuous meditation. In his poem entitled To the Awakened India, Swamiji writes, "The seer is great, whom age nor clime can claim their own. The fathers of the race who felt the heart of truth the same and bravely taught it to man, the secret 'tis but one. Then speak, O love. Before thy gentle voice serene, behold how visions melt, and fold on dreams departs to void, and truth alone in all its glory shines. And tell the world, awake, arise, and dream no more. This is the land of dreams, where karma weaves unthreaded garlands with our thought. And flowers sweet or noxious, none has root or stem, being born in naught, which the soft breath of truth drives back to primal nothingness. Behold and face the truth. Be one with it. Let visions cease, or if you cannot, dream but truer dreams, which are eternal love and service-free." This is practical Vedanta, which he spoke about, worship of the Spirit by the Spirit. And he says we should try to make things simpler and bring about the golden age when every man will be the worshiper and the reality in every man will be the object of his worship. We must transcend the idea that we are body and mind and realize our own spiritual nature. When God approaches us in any form, we must approach Him from the standpoint of love or devotion. If we really worship in spirit and in truth, everything that we do would become an offering, and we would feel the spiritual reality which is in us and in everything that we see. Surely knowing this truth would make us indeed free. Religious ideas will have to become universal, vast, and infinite, and then alone we'll have the full play of religion, for the power of religion has just begun to manifest in the world, Swamiji tells us. We feel sometimes that it's so materialistic. People don't seem interested in God or religion, but look around you. Many young people are doing yoga and meditating. They may not call it God, but many are searching for something more to life than just material well-being. Here in America, many are interested in Hindu ideas and culture. We know that just having wealth to lead a comfortable lifestyle is not enough to satisfy us. We have to find the reality behind all this. Swamiji says, sometimes it's said that religions are dying out, that spiritual ideas are dying out of the world. To me, it seems they've just begun to grow. The power of religion, broadened and purified, is going to penetrate every part of human life. So long as religion was in the hand of a chosen few, it was in temples, churches, books, dogmas, ceremonials, or forms. But when we come to the real spiritual concept, then and then alone, religion will become real and living. It will come into our own nature and live in every movement, every pore of our society, and be infinitely more a powerful good than it has ever been before. I think Swami Vivekananda would have been thrilled to see the world that we live in now. The wide communication and ability to travel, we take it for granted. With a click of the mouse, we can communicate with India at this very moment. We can access vast supplies of human knowledge. It's truly one world, a global reality. We can discriminate and make these tools opportunities for the power of good, as he says, more than they've ever been before. We can make them opportunities for the spiritual awareness of the whole world. This message is full of hope for us all. Stand up and manifest the spirituality that is in you. Now is the time. The strength is in you. This is worship by the Spirit. This is practical Vedanta. We'll end with another song Preeti will sing, and when Swamiji was traveling in Khetri, he was a friend of the Raja of Khetri, and when he was visiting with him one time, the Raja brought in a girl to sing, and Swamiji, being a monk, of course, got up to leave the room. And the Raja said, "Oh, Swamiji, you won't find anything objectionable in this song. In fact, you will like it." And he actually blessed the girl who sang. This is that song.
Prabhu व्याध पारस के मन विधा नहीं है, दो एक कंचन करो प्रभु मेरे, अवगुण चित ना धरो प्रभु मेरे, अवगुण चित ना धरो। एक नदिया एक नार कहावत, मैलो नीर भरो, जब मिली दोनों एक बरन भये, गंगा सुर सर नाम करो, एक जीव एक ब्रह्म कहावत, सूरदास जगरो, एक जीव एक ब्रह्म कहावत, सूरदास जगरो। अज्ञान से भेद होवे, अज्ञान से भेद होवे, ज्ञानी काहे भेद करो प्रभु मेरे, अवगुण चित ना धरो। समदर्शी है नाम तिहारो, समदर्शी है नाम तिहारो, चाहे तो पार करो प्रभु मेरे, अवगुण चित ना धरो प्रभु मेरे, अवगुण चित ना धरो।
Can you give us a translation?
O Lord, look not upon my evil qualities. Your name is same-sidedness. If you so desire, you can take me across the ocean of birth and death. One piece of iron is the image used in worship, and another the butcher's knife. But to the philosopher's stone there is no difference. It turns both alike into gold. One body of water is called a rivulet, and another is a roadside ditch filled with murky water. But when they both fall into the Ganga, they become the same color and are called the river of the gods. The individual soul and the absolute are called by different names, but Surdas argues, difference arises where there is ignorance. So why does the knower of truth differentiate the two?
Thank you. So I guess we're going into August here, and next week Swami Sarvadevananda will be speaking on the topic, We the People. And on the 13th, we're actually having two visiting Swamis coming, the Assistant General Secretary of the Ramakrishna Matan Mission and Swami Tyagananda. So save those days also. I think I was going to close with a chant, but I don't know. Let's see. Well, I guess I'll do this one. Om Jya Shantir Antariksham Shanti, Prithvi Shantirapa Shanti, Oshadaya Shantir, Vanaspataya Shantir, Vishwe Deva Shantir, Brahma Shanti, Sarvam Shanti, Shantireva Shanti, Same Shantireti, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace is in the heaven, peace is in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. The herbs, the plants, and the trees are all full of peace. The gods are peaceful. Everything in the universe is pervaded by peace. May this eternal, universal peace enter our soul and being. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.
Mataji, are you holding a Q&A in the green room?
I don't know. Does anybody have questions?
Please,
Okay, if you bring me some coffee.
And there are refreshments out there as usual.
Yeah.
It's okay, they all know.